We're going to go ahead and get started here. How's everybody doing?
Good.
It's getting cold out there. It's nice. It's a pretty good fall this year, I feel like. All righty. All right, we're going to jump back in. So, thanks for being here today. You might have been expecting to see Jake. Sorry, it's me again. Today we're going to be continuing our talk about 2 Samuel. And in the schedule we had shared, we're going to do two parts here on David's family drama, or I like to say the sword in the house of David, which we'll see is the language that Nathan uses when he curses David. I'll be talking here part one, and then part two, Jake's going to pick up next week and talk about Absalom's rebellion. So we're going to try to get in everything that we need to get in to set Jake up for success. I did want to make one correction from last week. Jake was nice to remind me. So when we were talking about Uriah, the David and Bathsheba narrative, I had mentioned the significance of the author mentioning both Bathsheba's father, Eliam, and Uriah, which was somewhat uncommon. They didn't just do one to introduce Bathsheba. They did both of them. And I had said that they weren't part of the mighty men, but I want to make a correction. They were listed among the 30, both of them, in chapter 23, verse 34 for Eliam, and then 23, verse 39 for Uriah. So that gives even more significance to the fact that people would have known these people, right? So Bathsheba wasn't just a nobody. She was the wife of one of the 30, one of the mighty warriors of King David. So where we left off last week, David and Bathsheba. I wanted to kind of retouch right here because I ran out of time last week, and I know in doing this I'll probably run out of time this week as well, but that's okay. We had kind of posed this question. When David is talking to him, and it's obvious that he's trying to get Uriah to go back to Bathsheba and lay with his wife, do you think he knows? Do you think Uriah knows what has happened? That was kind of where we had left things. I don't know. It kind of seems like it. Some of the ways that Uriah responds to David, it seems a little tongue-in-cheek, like he might know, why should I be able to go home and lay with my wife when all the other soldiers are still in battle? And he's very much an on-duty soldier, right, even though he came back to Jerusalem. So I don't know. Doesn't really matter. Either way, just as we saw with Paltiel, he's powerless. He has no control. Either he knows, and it's just he's kind of shrewdly aware while he's carrying this envelope back to Joab, or he doesn't, and it's just political irony. But the point is that he's powerless, essentially, against the kingdom of Israel, against the monarch. I want to look a little bit at the aftermath of David and Bathsheba, because this is really a pivotal moment, I think, in the book of 2 Samuel, where everything kind of slowly starts to go downhill for David after this mistake. I had mentioned in the first class kind of this idea. One of the commentaries says that the book of Samuel is about this power struggle for knowledge between Saul and David, where at the beginning in 1 Samuel, Saul is grasping at anything that'll stick. He never seems to have the answers. He's constantly looking for knowledge but never finds it. And in contrast, David can almost do no wrong. Everything that David touches works out for him. Even while he's gallivanting through outside of Israelite territory, he still has the Lord on his side, and he still has knowledge. Now, after the sin, the sexual immorality that David does with Bathsheba, I think we start to see that kind of dwindle, this idea where David can do no wrong. I think it's pretty obvious that David did some wrong, and we're going to see this kind of pivotal moment right here. If you can, open up your Bibles to 2 Samuel 12. So I don't have time to get into the whole parable that Nathan gives, but this whole section is super good. I'm sure some of you have read it. If you haven't, I highly recommend you to go through and read it. But essentially, Nathan comes in to talk to David, and he tells this parable about these lambs, and this lamb is taken from this guy. It's all he has, and he really gets David riled up and gets him really angry and kind of traps him a little bit, where he essentially enacts judgment in this parable. And then Nathan flips the script and says, hey, you are the man. You are the one that has done this. So starting in verse 7, Nathan said to David, you are the man. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel. I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you out of the hand of Saul. And I gave you your master's house and your master's wives into your arms, and gave you the house of Israel and of Judah. And if this were too little, I would add to you as much more. Why have you despised the word of the Lord to do what is evil in his sight? You have struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword, and have taken his wife to be your wife, and have killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. Now, therefore, the sword shall never depart your house, because you have despised me and taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife. Thus says the Lord, behold, I will raise up evil against you out of your own house. And I will take your wives before your eyes and give them to your neighbor, and he shall lie with your wives in the sight of the sun. For what you did secretly, but I will do this thing before all of Israel and before the sun. David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. And Nathan said to David, the Lord has also put away your sin. You shall not die. Nevertheless, because by the deed you have utterly scorned the Lord, the child who is born to you shall die. And then Nathan went to his house. His work here is done. I love that. So, what do we learn there? God is telling David that, hey, from this moment on, there's going to be conflict within your house, with your sons, with your family, with your wives. And I think that is one of the main reasons why we have, I know Jake and I have made the joke that this whole book is kind of like a soap opera because there's like so much drama. But it's true. It really is. And this is a big reason why, because of the thing that David did to Uriah. So where do we go from there? We don't have time to get into it, but I highly recommend going through and reading that and then pairing it with Psalm 51, which is a psalm that David wrote kind of when he was struggling going through this, while he's kind of grieving for his son that he knows is dying. But what we really see here is this is the first domino. This is the first domino that David kind of pushes over, and it's this turning point for him. And eventually we're going to see this lead all the way to him being somewhat manipulated. He's no longer the main character towards the end of his life. Instead, his sons are vying for power and vying for the throne, and then even Bathsheba and Nathan later on manipulate him to put Solomon, to anoint Solomon. We're going to look at the first kind of main point of strife with David's sons. I put together this diagram. Of course, it's hard to see. But really, when you go through this, if you read this, like get a piece of paper out, because they'll throw these names around, and it's hard to keep track of. And a good way to do that is to make these charts, so that's what I did. But we're going to take a look today at the narrative of Amnon and Tamar, which is one of kind of the first moments of this realization, I think, for David, that this strife is constantly going to be in his house. So, who is Amnon? Amnon is from his firstborn son. Let's see, I think there's a pointer on this. Yeah. So right here, firstborn son from Ahinoam. And then another character that we're going to see here is Absalom, which is Amnon's half-brother. And then obviously Tamar, who's Absalom's sister, and then Amnon's half-sister. So go ahead and open up to chapter 13. And we're just going to read a bit here. All right, starting in verse 1. Now Absalom, David's son, had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar. And after a time, Amnon, David's son, loved her. And Amnon was so tormented that he made himself ill because of his sister Tamar. For she was a virgin, and it seemed impossible to Amnon to do anything to her. But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shimea, David's brother. So that would make him his cousin. And this is David's older brother. Shimea is David's older brother. So remember Jonadab. He's going to be important. And Jonadab was a very crafty man. And he said to him, "O son of the king, why are you so haggard morning after morning? Will you not tell me?" Amnon said to him, "I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister." Jonadab said to him, "Lie down on your bed and pretend to be ill. When your father comes to see you, say to him, 'Let my sister Tamar come and give me bread to eat, and prepare the food in my sight, that I may see it and eat it from her hand.'" So Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. And when the king came to see him, Amnon said to the king, "Please, let my sister Tamar come and make a couple of cakes in my sight, that I may eat from her hand." Then David sent home to Tamar, saying, "Go to your brother Amnon's house and prepare food for him." So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house where he was lying down, and she took the dough, kneaded it, and made cakes in his sight, and baked the cakes. And she took the pan and emptied it out before him, but he refused to eat. And Amnon said, Send out everyone from me." So everyone went out from him. Then Amnon said to Tamar, "Bring the food into my chamber, that I may eat from your hand." And Tamar took the cakes that she had made and brought them into the chamber to Amnon, her brother. But when she brought them near him to eat, he took hold of her and said to her, "Come lie with me, my sister." And she answered him, "No, my brother, do not violate me, for such a thing is not done in Israel. Do not do this outrageous thing. As for me, where could I carry my shame? And as for you, you would be one of the outrageous fools in Israel. Now, therefore, please speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you." But he would not listen to her, and being stronger than she, he violated her and lay with her. Let's pause right there for a minute. In many ways, I think there's some kind of mirroring of this. It's interesting that this falls right after the David and Bathsheba narrative and some of the outfall from the curse there, because in many ways, I think that there's some mirroring going on with that narrative. I think it's also interesting that David continually just finds himself struggling with his older brothers. Jonadab being his nephew from his older brother, the older brothers have a history of not thinking David deserved kind of what he got, right? And where he is. An interesting thing to note here, when she says, "Do not do this outrageous thing to me," this scurrilous is a word that I had to look up. Anyone know what that means? It's a weird word. We do have a mic, by the way. Elijah, he's ready to go. And Brandon. Okay, no one wants to say it if they know. Making or spreading scandalous claims about someone with the intention of damaging their reputation. One thing that I thought was interesting, this exact quote, "Do not do this outrageous thing or scurrilous thing," is the same exact phrase from the Ephraimite in Gibeah in Judges when they try to come and like, "Hey, who's in your house? And let us in so that we can, do outrageous and scurrilous things." This is exactly what he says. And interestingly, both of those things eventually lead to this like civil war. So one thing I want to hone in on that I think is really interesting is this concept here in verse 13. "Now, therefore, please speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you." So this idea of why take me by force when you could have me legitimately? All right, this is where I know I've been talking for a while, so I'll stop talking, and we're back to discussion class. What do you guys think this is about? I think that's kind of strange. Is that true? Do you think that David would have given Tamar to Amnon? What are the thoughts on verse 13? What was that, a tactic? A stall tactic, totally. Yeah, it could very well be just like, hey, trying to buy time. Yeah, Larry.
I've always wondered if this situation, as well as some others you're going to cover, shows that David had lost his moral authority in the kingdom. That, well, if you can get away with adultery and murder, then, who are you to tell me what to do?
Absolutely.
I should be able to do what I want.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know he lost that moral authority with his sons, and we're going to see that very obviously. Can you imagine being a dad and saying, hey, don't do this thing, and then Amnon would be like, hey, didn't you just take Bathsheba from Uriah and kill him? And there's definitely a power struggle for moral authority going on. Could be a scare tactic. This technically isn't true. So it is not legal, according to the book of Leviticus, to marry your half-sister. So then the question becomes, is it just a tactic? Or would David maybe have made an exception? I don't know. Any thoughts? Okay, maybe we're reading too much into it. We'll see. We're going to come back to this, though. It's interesting. We know that by the letter of the law, this cannot happen. But we've seen David break the letter of the law. And so perhaps he would make an exception. It's hard to say. All right, let's keep reading. Picking up back in verse 15. So being stronger than she, he violated her and lay with her. Then Amnon hated her with very great hatred, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her. And Amnon said to her, "Get up, go." But she said to him, "No, my brother, for this wrong in sending me away is greater than the other that you did to me," other being the rape. But he would not listen to her. He called the young man who served him and said, "Put this woman out of my presence and bolt the door." Now she was wearing a very long robe with sleeves, for thus were the virgin daughters of the king dressed. So his servant put her out and bolted the door after her. And Tamar put ashes on her head and tore the long robe that she wore. Then she laid her hand on her head and went away crying aloud as she went. Then her brother Absalom said to her, "Has Amnon your brother been with you? Now hold your peace, my sister. He is your brother. Do not take this to heart." So Tamar lived a desolate woman in her brother Absalom's house. When King David heard all these things, he was very angry. But Absalom spoke to Amnon neither good nor bad, for Absalom hated Amnon because he had violated his sister. So when the king heard all of these things, he was angry. Does anyone, on verse 21, does anyone have a footnote in their Bible on that verse? I think, hopefully, most of you do. Huh? On verse 21, 13:21. Yeah? What's it say? We got a mic up here? Dude, you're going to lose your job, Elijah. You got to pick up the pace.
It says, from the Dead Sea Scroll, Septuagint, it adds, "But he would not punish," I'm assuming is David, "would not punish his son Amnon because he loved him, since he was in his firstborn."
Yeah, awesome. Does that maybe change your perspective on that verse about the exception, this idea? Maybe it is a stall tactic. I think it's probably a little bit of both. I don't think she would have had much say in it either way, even if David was willing to make an exception. There's a little bit of seemingly favoritism here, kind of. We know that he was angry, but we also know that he didn't do anything. And because he didn't do anything, I think to Larry's point, this is him somewhat relinquishing that moral authority that he could have had. He would have been well within his right to, hey, yeah, I messed up with Bathsheba. You know, God, I reconciled with God, and this is how we do things here, and he could have made things right. But he didn't, at least not here. Yeah.
We see this played out in our society a lot of just what's mistaken for family love is really enabling and a product of guilt. Mm-hmm. And I agree with Larry that the moral authority is absolutely gone. Mm-hmm. And he's reaping what he sowed.
Yeah, totally. I mean, this is textbook Nathan's curse, right? This is kind of the beginning we're seeing of this decline. Things are going to start to spiral, and David seems somewhat powerless, or he chooses to be powerless. He definitely chooses not to punish him here. Yeah. One more comment up here.
Yeah, I was just going to add. Also, when we think about the Old Testament and all the stuff these guys went through, it is. I don't think we go through near the stuff these guys went through. Oh,
Yeah.
I got a big mouth.
No, you're fine.
Okay. Oh, well, there's that. Yeah. So it just shows to us that no matter where our walk is in this world, it doesn't matter what we have done in the past or anything else. We can still be saved, make it to heaven. You know.
Totally.
And I really believe that. Just by watching and hearing the Old Testament, you know, because it's awesome that God will take us through that. And I think that's what happened with David. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, he was the apple of God's eye. I mean, you know, and so that was a huge thing for us to understand how much it was important to all of us, you know, to see that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, thanks.
No, absolutely. It's a great comment. I mean, David's always referred to as the man after God's own heart, right? And it's encouraging in one way to see stuff like this and think, well, there's some hope for me, right? Absolutely, yeah. Great comment. There's one interesting parallel between the rape of Dinah and Jacob's response to that. After he hears about that, he also has an action. And then David, like Jacob, after this, will kind of be at the mercy of what his sons decide to do going forward. It's interesting that we see those kind of narrative patterns repeat throughout the Old Testament. One comment I wanted to make here about this footnote specifically that I think is just super cool is the significance of the Dead Sea Scrolls and that discovery, which really was not that long ago. It was like 80s, I think, 84 maybe, 70? No? People are shaking their head. I thought it wasn't that long ago. 47? Okay, I was way off. But it still wasn't that long ago in the scheme of things of our very old Bible. But what's cool about that is the original Masoretic text is what we have, most of us have in our Bibles, and you have that footnote, and it just says he was angry, and they left it at that. But when you add that footnote, the Septuagint, which we know is the Greek translation of the Old Testament, they have, but he would not punish his son Amnon because he loved him, for he was his firstborn. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Hey, great point, Larry. Great point. For those online who didn't hear him, Zach is right. No, absolutely. Larry's comment was, while it was discovered in the 40s, it took years and years and years to catalog, preserve these papyri, and then eventually translate them. Yeah.
Well, also with Adonijah, David's son, when David was really, really old, it says David would never say anything to him and ask him, why do you do what you do?
Yeah, yeah. David has a soft spot for his sons, it seems. Even later on, we'll see with Absalom's rebellion, he eventually brings him back. And then, with Adonijah as well. It's very interesting. So one thing that I think is interesting about this is, like, in the Septuagint, they have this. The significance to the Dead Sea Scrolls, right, is when they found all these scrolls, they obviously had scrolls of the Septuagint. They also had scrolls of the original Hebrew. And they could cross-reference these things, right? And like Larry said, it took a long time to get all that stuff translated. But once they had that, they could kind of cross-reference. And a lot of our translations today kind of keep this stuff in mind, right? And we end up with footnotes like this. So why was it not there in one and maybe added in the Septuagint? Or who knows? There's people who devote their whole lives to arguing this type of stuff. But I do think it's very, very interesting. All right. So, in verse 22, we're told that Absalom spoke to Amnon neither good nor bad, for Absalom hated Amnon because he had violated his sister Tamar. And then we're graced with this in verse 23. After 2 full years, Absalom had sheep shearers at Baal-Hazor, which is near Ephraim, and Absalom invited all the king's sons. So Absalom is like, hey, I'm going to throw a party, guys. Like, let's go. And Absalom came to the king and said, behold, your servant has sheep shearers. Please let the king and his servants go with your servant. But the king said to Absalom, no, my son, let us not all go, lest we be burdensome to you. He pressed him, but he would not go, but he gave him his blessing. It's interesting here. I wonder if this is David's kind of attempt at seeing through some of this stuff. And while he might not have the moral authority anymore, maybe he's trying to prevent some drama from going on. I don't know. It's interesting to kind of try to get inside David's head. Then Absalom said, if not, please let my brother Amnon go with us. Okay, now that's a little suspicious. But and the king said to him, why should he go with you? But Absalom pressed him until he let Amnon and all the king's sons go with him. Then Absalom commanded his servants, mark, when Amnon's heart is merry with wine, and when I say to you, strike Amnon, then kill him. Do not fear. Have I not commanded you? Be courageous and be valiant. So the servants of Absalom did to Amnon as Absalom had commanded. Then all the king's sons arose, and each mounted his mule and fled. All right, this is where it gets interesting. Verse 30, while they were on their way, news came to David. Absalom has struck down all the king's sons, and not one of them is left. Then the king arose, and he tore his garments and lay on the earth. And all his servants who were standing by tore their garments. Oh, man, I just want to keep reading. It's so good. All right, I am going to keep reading. Back in verse 32, but Jonadab, the son of Shemiah, David's brother, said, let not my lord suppose that they have killed all the young men, the king's sons, for Amnon alone is dead. For by the command of Absalom, this has been determined from the day that he violated his sister Tamar. Now, therefore, let not my lord the king so take it to heart as to suppose that all the king's sons are dead, for Amnon alone is dead. Do you guys remember Jonadab? He is pretty crafty. They told us that. I can't tell you how many times I've read through this. And I read Jonadab once, and then maybe it was the next day I read Jonadab in the next chapter, and I totally missed it. It's interesting that the one who kind of set all of this in motion is also the one that's very conveniently near the king to be able to relieve him from the fact that, no, hey, David is worried, right? David is worried. We see this very human moment where he is worried about his throne. He's worried about his kingdom. He thinks he has no sons left to carry on his kingdom. But then conveniently, Jonadab is there to say, hey, it's okay. It's just Amnon. What are your guys' thoughts on that? Maybe it's just me. I think that's super interesting. Any thoughts? How did Jonadab know that? I don't know. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Makes you wonder, how did he know that? There's some scheming and conniving. I'm telling you, it's cinematic. Like, it's so good. Yeah, how did Jonadab know? One of the things that I think is interesting here is the connection to his older brothers, right? He is constantly in strife, and we see this again later on, where now it's not just his sons, but it's the whole house of David, his nephews, his cousins of his sons, and his brothers, and the whole family is vying for power and vying for this opportunity to get at the throne. And obviously, David is thinking about that because he's very, very worried when he thinks he loses all of his sons, I think as anyone would be. Yeah, it's interesting. How did Jonadab know? I don't know. Yeah, another comment up here.
Jonadab reminds me of Haman in the story of Esther, that he is conniving and wanting to be close to power and be in the king's graces.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's not surprising that he
Yeah.
probably had spies or went to the party himself. Who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. He is definitely crafty. He's very crafty. He one of the things I thought was kind of interesting here. Verse 32 tells us. Let's see here. From the beginning. Ooh, yeah. Great comment. Yeah. So verse 32, it gives us kind of a little clue that he knows Absalom's motive. From the beginning, Absalom has intended to do this. He waited 2 years to do it. And we know when he told Tamar, like, hey, steady your heart. This is your brother. If it was anyone else, I would go kill him right now. But this is my brother. This is your brother. But he kind of tells her, like, hey, keep your peace. I'll make this right. And in his own time, he does. Yeah, great comment. Another thing that I thought was interesting, one of the commentaries that I read in talking about the beginning of the Amnon and Tamar narrative, where Jonadab kind of sets this up, it's asking the question, is he intending for Amnon to rape his sister? Or is he merely just trying to set up a meeting, introduce them, give them some time together? And that might seem insignificant. I think the point that they were trying to make is that it makes David's inaction and his favoritism and even Tamar's plea to go talk to the king so that we can be together legitimately, it kind of gives that some more weight. That might be reaching, but it is interesting to think through the motive for Jonadab. And as you read through it, he doesn't say, hey, go rape your sister. He says, go lie and pretend to be ill and then tell David. It's also interesting that David has kind of entered this whole theme of inaction where he doesn't do much. He tells other people to do things. And I think it's really significant that he is the one that sends for Tamar and says to Tamar, hey, go to your brother. Yeah, it's interesting. Jonadab, he's a crafty fellow. Any other comments? Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah. No, you're fine. Well, Brandon's here. Speaking of,
Brandon, I don't want that. I thought we chatted about this, sir. Let me think. I had a really good question, though. Okay, yes. So we haven't heard much anymore about Tamar other than this incident, right? Or have we? I really don't know.
We know that she kind of becomes just a woman who stays at her brother's house.
Yeah, so
she lives out her days there.
Yeah, so she has no family, no nothing.
Yep.
That's really a ripoff, huh?
Yeah,
I mean, seriously.
Yeah, it's pretty unfortunate. I
Yeah,
think
that's really sad.
she's thinking about that too, right? Like honing in after Amnon does what he does, she says, hey, like, get out, right? He's like, get out. And she says, hey, wait a minute. You making me leave, this is even worse than what you already did. Why is that worse? Well, it's law that if you rape someone, you now are required to make them your wife and take care of them for this reason, because no one else is going to go and marry her. Yeah, she totally gets the bad end of the deal there. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it all trickles down from David's example becoming more infamous to his family as they idolized him, I'm sure. And that may be part of the problem is he became idolized by a lot of people where when he broke down morally, things started decaying. But I see it more as a power struggle and maybe even God giving grace saying, you could be like Saul. I could take your throne. Mm-hmm. And Tamar is obviously just a pawn in the, unfortunately, the sad loss.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of Uriah and Paltiel. They're powerless against the throne. Isn't it interesting? Did God want this? No. But, okay, Samuel, if the people want a king, this is what it looks like. And the book of Samuel is really a glimpse into the impact that this monarchy has on everyday people. Obviously, Tamar's not everyday people, but Paltiel, that was his wife. And they just came and took him. Yeah, absolutely. Great comments. Yeah, Brandon?
Well, I can't help but think about David, and he had to know, right, he's in the back of his mind, he knows what Nathan told him, right? And now here he sees the first domino, like you mentioned, but, think about 2 years, like he's got to be the whole time wondering, like, when is this going to happen? It's not going to go away.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, I wonder if he just hears that from Nathan on repeat through his head. Or I wonder if it's enough time separated that he forgets, and then something like this happens, and he's like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Nathan was right. I think we'll definitely see as we get into Absalom's rebellion that I think it probably is on repeat in his head. He's constantly thinking through this. But yeah, I mean, yeah, the fact that God doesn't just take it all away from him, I think is telling as well. He did genuinely repent after the encounter with Bathsheba. He mourned for his son that he knew was lost anyways because God had told him. So throughout this all, yeah, he might have lost some of the moral authority with his family, but he did not lose his relationship with God, which I think is super encouraging. I made another chart, but it's just what we already did. I like charts. All right, we've got a few minutes left. With these last few minutes, I just want to dig into, like we said, this is in some ways the second domino, right? With Amnon and Tamar. He does kind of seem somewhat aware because he's a little suspicious of Absalom. He's like, why do you want Amnon to come to your feast? Well, okay, and then he's persistent and he gives in and they come. Keep in mind, I think it's also interesting that the author gives us the little tidbit right after the account that tells us that Absalom never spoke a word good or bad to Amnon. So they were civil. He was waiting his time. But I do think that's interesting. So we had already talked about the decline of knowledge, the transfer of knowledge. I think that's pretty obvious as we see he's becoming less of the main character and his sons are kind of taking over. Similar, we had said the parallel with Jacob where he's kind of at the mercy of his sons. David's beginning to get to the point where he's just trying to keep up with the savviness of his sons. So he's consistently unaware of the political maneuverings that his sons are doing. And then by the end of it, we'll see in 1 Kings that he's old and frail and cold. He just becomes this old man that's king, but you still have all these things going on. Adonijah was mentioned. You have all this vying for power between. That's the first bell, right? First bell, I think. All right. So I want to close with this. Do you guys remember as David was kind of on the scene coming up in 1 Samuel, this idea where we had said he goes and defeats the Goliath, right? And then things are just kind of always on his side. He's a cool dude. He just looks cool. Everything he does works out for him. It's really interesting in chapter 15. We kind of see this start to shift. And the way that the author of Samuel used to talk about David, we see him start to talk about Absalom. So in chapter 15, verse 13, after this happens, Absalom, kind of goes on the run, and then eventually Joab convinces David to, hey, let's let him come back. Let's let him come back. But remember this idea of the author of Samuel kind of having the layperson in mind, like thinking about what the layperson would have thought while they were reading this. He gives us plenty of these clues like this in verse 13. So Absalom's conspiracy is starting to grow, and Jake's going to get into the whole rebellion next week, but a messenger came to David saying, hey, the hearts of the men of Israel have gone after Absalom. Then David said to all of his servants who were here with him at Jerusalem, arise, let us flee, or else there will be no escape for us from Absalom. He's scared of him. Does that sound familiar? This like rising in the hearts of the people of Israel for Absalom. And then we're given in verse 25, if we go down a little bit. No, that's not right. It's not verse 25. Where is it? Okay, that verse is wrong. I can't find it, but I'm just going to read it. It's not verse 25. But later on, we're told, now in Israel, there was no one so much to be praised for his handsome appearance as Absalom. And then it goes on and it tells us, hey, from his head to his toe, there was no blemish. So it's like, all right, this Absalom guy, he's pretty good. Seems like he's pretty good. And then we see this launch into his conspiracy, and David is fleeing. David's running. He's scared of this. There's this coup that is taking place. It is very similar, I think, to kind of the rise in the way that David came to power. And I think to Brandon's comment too, it makes you wonder, is David thinking, man, I'm going to lose all this? Maybe I'm not where I need to be with God. Maybe the lack of moral authority has caught up with me. Maybe he's clearly scared that he's going to die. Maybe he's wondering, oh man, maybe I've made some mistakes. And he flees. I don't want to go any further into that because Jake is going to absolutely 14:25. Thank you. So it was before. I'm sorry. So before in 14:25, they told us, he's beautiful and there's no blemish. And then we get that glimpse into, hey, the hearts of the people of Israel are turning towards Absalom. Do you think that they kind of thought like, yeah, go Absalom after they killed Amnon? Surely they knew. Like, this stuff gets around, right? Everyone's got their spies. Everyone is kind of becoming aware of what happened, that Amnon raped his sister. Do you think there's people that are like, hey, Team Absalom? And then he kills him. And then it's clear like, hey, Absalom maybe has something going here. We're going to stop there. Next week, we're going to get into Absalom's rebellion, and Jake is going to dig into the aftermath of that. And I think that's where we'll really see the sword in the house of David go kind of in every single direction. So that's it. Thank you all.